Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X on the 12th of August of the calendar year 2025. Coming to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. And here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Uh, Lots to get to on the historical front regarding a premier all-time great. Before I proceed about this, just want to preface what I always introduce myself to, as I do all the time. For the new followers, all sports, all topics, past to present. Certain topics like this one regarding the individual of his past, I like to reiterate and discuss about, maybe shed some light on some things we don't remember from revisionist history. So that's what I'm going to do today, particularly with this particular athlete I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to get right down to it. The athlete is none other than Spanish Harlem's very own Hector Macho Camacho. Of course, I had other shows about him, especially the Rosario fight. But we're going to go back before the Rosario fight when Hector Camacho was really on the come up, because it was on this day on two separate occasions in 1983 and 1985. He hit the landmark of his career. We talk about when he won the super featherweight title from Bazooka Limon and when he won the lightweight championship from Jose Luis Ramirez. It was a thing; those things were a thing of beauty. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to break down each particular fight, how we got to this point, and we talk about what he got to in the sense of Hector Camacho's career in and out of the ring, which we know it's something within itself. So we're gonna I will divulge into that here this evening. So I'm gonna get started here real quick. Usually what I like to do when I do something like this, I introduce the background of the individual before I divulge into their career, and that's what I want to do with Hector Camacho. Everybody knows the career of Hector Camacho, especially the fight game. Puerto Rican fighter, went to sport out of the streets of Bayamon, one of the real dark areas of the Puerto Rican neighborhood, basically filled with high crime, drugs, among many other things. Moved to Spanish Harlem in New York, where he embarked on an amateur career where he essentially won three amateur Golden Gloves championships, which is something nobody in the fight community knows about Hector Camacho. Won three Golden Gloves championships, especially in the state of New York, because when you were a Golden Gloves champion in the state of New York, it was a big deal. And Hector Camacho did it three times in the lighter weight classes. And his biggest thing with him was he dazzled everyone with the main thing was speed and quickness, like nothing they haven't seen. I mean, the only one remotely close at that time was Sugar Ray Leonard, a couple years before, when Leonard, of course, won the gold medal in 1976. But for Hector Camacho, it was one of those wow things as an amateur, as a young kid out of Spanish Harlem, fighting as an amateur out of Madison Square Garden, packing the house, basically drawing crowds and having people, especially the respected commissioner Randy Gordon, just having their eyes open and saying, wow, what a kid this guy was. And that's what he was as an amateur. What are you talking about from 76 to 78? Now, he had a chance to be a part of the 1980 Olympics, but lost an Olympic qualifier. But he probably could have won the gold medal because Hector Camacho just had the kind of a different, unique style that made him different from everyone else. And that was basically his big thing, which I'll touch on later on when I divulge into his pro career. He wanted to be himself. He didn't want to be the next Ali, the next Sugar Ray Leonard, the next Sugar Ray Robinson. He wanted to be the first Hector Camacho, and basically as an amateur, that's what he was, and that's what stood out with him among many other things in the amateur boxing scene, especially in the New York Golden Gloves, where back in those days, New York Golden Gloves was the legit thing when we talk about amateur careers, especially in the sport of boxing. Now, of course, it was shortly thereafter he would turn professional. He would embark on a career of just a small amount of fights, and basically got into a title eliminator on nationwide television against a tough fighter named John Montez over in Anchorage, Alaska, of all places. And Hector Camacho, win would put him in a line for a title shot. At the time of the champion was Bazooka Limon. Excuse me, the champion at the time was Bobby Chacon. I apologize. It was Bobby Chacon who was a champion. And for Camacho to get a title shot, he had to fight this eliminator against a very tough John Montez, who basically was not a great guy, but one of those trial horses you had to get over if you want to get to that next level, because John Montez was a tough fighter back in those days who can bring it. And basically, it was a title eliminator where the winner was going to be the mandatory for Bobby Chacon. And basically, what turned out onto this point, what nobody knew was, I'll divulge on the fight in a second, but everything that took place in and out of the ring is chronicled in the past of Hector Camacho. Reared its ugly head the days before the fight, because it was also revealed that Hector Camacho somehow lost his mind and was trying to jump out of a windowsill just a couple days before this particular fight in his where he was staying at in Anchorage, Alaska. And basically they were calling everyone, especially people from CBS Sports, most notably the standout Tim Ryan, who did a play-by-play for that fight, the voice of CBS Boxing for many years. And basically, the guy was able to get him to calm down, settle down, and basically just told Hector Camacho everything was going to be okay. And so what happens? We get the fight 2 days later in Anchorage, Alaska, and basically Hector Camacho just acts like that whole thing doesn't happen, where he basically just gets in that ring, puts the perfect left cross that sends John Montez down and out for the count in 1 round to win the title eliminator to fight for the super featherweight championship. And basically in that night, Hector Camacho just, again, in basically his toughest test as a pro at that moment, opened a lot of eyes, got a lot of people watching in, and had people just tuning into what this guy was going to do. And basically in the ring, he showed it. John Montez, a tough fighter, but the perfectly placed combination that Camacho put on Montez put him down and out for good. And Hector Camacho is now the mandatory for the super featherweight championship. The champion at that time was Bazooka Limon, and he was stripped of that title because he wanted he felt like he was shorted by both the governing body and promoter Don King, who promoted Hector Camacho at the time. And so Hector Camacho was still the number 1 contender for that title. So now we enter the day he was waiting for, the fight for the super featherweight championship in his own hometown of San Juan, Puerto Rico, against a tough standout Mexican, longtime veteran, a couple times a world champion in that weight class, actually a rival of Bobby Chacon's, a fellow named Rafael Bazooka Limon. Of course, in the hometown of Puerto Rico, had everyone, in Puerto Rico packed that particular stadium. And of course, the pressure was on Hector Camacho to win a title in his own home country because everyone came to see him. I mean, not just in terms of him. We talk about Hector Camacho as a fighter, but how he was, in and out of the ring, because his style and flamboyance started to catch on to the Puerto Rican public at that time. And on this particular day, the golden opportunity he was waiting for, he went over and took advantage of it against a strong, tough, very good veteran fighter in Bazooka Limon. And in this particular fight, from start to finish, Bazooka Limon had no answers for the speed and the skill set of Hector Camacho, especially out of the southpaw stance. Of course, the big left hand late in the 3rd round that hurt him. And of course, we go fast forward to round 5, floored him once. And of course, after Limon gets up, the famous combination when he pins Limon on the ropes and puts Limon through the ropes, but just adding on with combinations to the body and head out of the southpaw stance, just overwhelming Bazooka Limon with his speed and skill, and put Hector Camacho to the brink of winning this world title. Limon goes down through the ropes. He gets up. Seconds later, after he gets up, Camacho puts on another rally, and the fight is stopped. And Hector Camacho hits his pinnacle for the first of his time in his career, winning the World Super Featherweight Championship. And a dazzling performance that basically just opened to the boxing world and became not just the biggest household name at that time, also became probably the flashiest fighter at the time, because remember, when this was happening, Sugar Ray Leonard was sidelined, who was the flashiest fighter and the biggest name south of the heavyweight division at that time. But Leonard retired, and basically at that time, the sport had a bunch of blue-collar, grit and grind type fighters like Larry Holmes, Thomas Hearns, Marvin Hagler, Wilfredo Gomez, a fellow Puerto Rican of Hector Camacho, among others. But in terms of flash and dazzle, the it guy, Hector Camacho was the it guy when this took place 42 years ago today in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And Hector Camacho basically just hit his landmark. And at that point, he got all kinds of magazine deals, had all kinds of posing magazine deals. Not even going to discuss that part of it. And of course, one of the rare cases of a fighter who got a television contract because it was CBS who signed him to it after this particular fight, and basically saying, this is who we're going to invest in." And basically, they made the investment in signing Hector Camacho to a lucrative deal. And Hector Camacho started to become the premier name in the not just the south of the heavyweight division, but in all of the sport. And it looked like his career was ready to take off. How can you not like the guy at the time? I mean, he had the dazzling jewelry, the suntan, the suntan when he was living in Florida. I mean, he had the perfect suntan for a fighter. The ideal body that a male, especially down to the Hispanic community, would dream of having. Hector Camacho was all of that and then some. When you talk about exhibitionism of his kind, he was the first one to break those barriers in the 80s with the tan, the outfits, among many other things. And that's what got the boxing fraternity admiring and falling in love with him because of what he brought to the table at that time in terms of his showmanship, his ability to balance showmanship and in the ring action, because he balanced it well, pretty darn good. But it was starting at this point, after he won the title and got to the Ascension, a lot of things around him started to become different. A lot of things started to change. Because now what happens is, now when he gets to the price of fame, everyone wants to talk to him. Everyone wants to deal with him. And basically, everything starts to slowly add up. Because Hector Camacho, it was chronicled, started getting to the life of partying, especially when we consider the parts of the towns he was coming from. And we consider he was the biggest attraction at the time. Everyone wanted to be with Hector Camacho. Everyone wanted to see Hector Camacho in and out of the ring. And Hector Camacho got suckered into that lifestyle slowly but surely. And after that point, people were wondering what's going to become of Hector Camacho, because after he won the super featherweight title, he took many, many months off. And basically people wondered if he's still fighting or everything's going to be okay. So now we fast forward to January of 1985, when he, again on CBS Network, when he fights another journeyman named Louis Burke, where a win on this night is going to give him another title shot against the Edwin Rosario Jose Luis Ramirez rematch winner, which turned out to be Jose Luis Ramirez, which I'll touch on in a second. Hector Camacho put on a good performance, but not a great performance. I mean, he was solid. He got the win. He stopped Burke in the 5th round, the same way he stopped Bazooka Limon. Not as impressively or dazzling, because, we're going to win for a world title is one thing. But this is a case of where maybe the in and outs of Hector Camacho were beginning to start to pile on here a little bit, simply because Hector Camacho, as we know, lived a party lifestyle. And when you live a sort of a lifestyle, it'll find ways to catch up with you. Now, luckily, he lucked out against Burke, because Louis Burke didn't offer much. And the win of this fight basically put him back in the title hunt 7 months later, which was 40 years ago today in Vegas, when he fought the standout Jose Luis Ramirez, a 90-win world champion who entered this fight with 90 wins on his dossier. And basically, this was viewed as a pick 'em fight because of the turmoil that took place with Hector Camacho outside of the ring. You didn't want to go in a fight against a 90-win fighter, perception-wise, with all the turmoil. Some of the things that happened after the Louis Burke fight, he flunked a marijuana drug test and was suspended for 90 days. And going into that fight, he fired his longtime manager, Billy Giles, who was sort of like a father figure to Hector Camacho, because if you know the story, he never had a real father figure growing up. Not the great relationship between Hector and his dad. And to put it in this perspective, it was like the day Mike Tyson fired Kevin Rooney, or theoretically like Emmanuel Stewart or Lennox Lewis firing Emmanuel Stewart, because that's what Billy Giles was to Hector Camacho. And after that happened, there was a lot of questions going into this fight coming up August 12th, 1985, on HBO Sports World Championship Boxing. Across a nationwide audience, it was Hector Camacho challenging Jose Luis Ramirez for the lightweight title. Remind you, Ramirez was about a little less than a year removed from demolishing Edwin Rosario to win the title. Had a lot of momentum. You're talking about a 90-win fighter and a proven vet. But on this particular night, once again, Hector Camacho showed the whole world just how great he was and how great he could be. Because we talk about performances of perfection. This was one of them, because the speed, the southpaw stance, and the reflexes, the ring generalship, everything that Hector Camacho showed when he destroyed Bazooka Limon. Did the same thing here when he just basically picked apart Jose Luis Ramirez, a 90-win world champion who basically every time he fought, he basically won for the most part. He was 90-5 going in, and the fight was basically a toss-up. Hector Camacho did anything and everything he wanted to do to get a unanimous decision win, flooring the tough chin, tough, durable Mexican Ramirez in the process, en route to winning the lightweight championship, which you'd probably say his finest hour. The Bazooka Limon fight was a coming out party. The Ramirez fight put him in that section of one of the better fighters in the sport, pound for pound. And it looked like finally, we was going to get the Hector Camacho everyone wanted to see. The style, the flamboyance, the speed. And when he just basically just shut out Jose Luis Ramirez, basically was a shutout. I mean, the judges gave Ramirez rounds out of sympathy more than anything else. That we thought we were going to ascend to something great because now Hector Camacho, everyone wanted a Hector Camacho at that point. After a non-title win over Freddie Roach, we know what happens June 13th, 1986, when he fought Edwin Rosario. If you guys know that fight, you know the story with that. For you newbies, I have the Camacho Rosario telecast on my platforms. You're more than welcome to listen to it about the Camacho Rosario fight. I won't touch on this much. We're here. Storyline with this one was, of course, the round 5 left hook that Edwin Rosario hit Hector Camacho with. And everything went topsy-turvy for Hector Camacho from that point for the rest of his career. And you could probably say for the rest of his life, which I'll touch on in the end here in a minute. But when you think about the 2 wins over Limon and Ramirez for Hector Camacho and all the inconsistencies in between, maybe in hindsight we should have seen it coming for the Rosario fight because the signs were there. I mean, it happens with everyone. When you have a standout fighter like that, and we have a right-hand man like he had with Billy Giles for the longest time, because Giles to Camacho was, for newer fans, it was like what Kevin Rooney was to Mike Tyson, what Emanuel Stewart was to both Thomas Hearns and Lennox Lewis. After he fired him, sent him going, Hector Camacho didn't have the guy that could probably just keep him in check, keep him straight, and keep him on a straight and narrow. He didn't want that anymore, and that's why he sent Billy Giles out the door. Of course, part of it also was Giles later one of the Ring Magazine's boxing magazine articles, I can't remember which, revealed the ongoing cocaine addiction that Hector Camacho had, which was chronicled. That's what part of it led to the firing, largely because Hector Camacho denied it, and he didn't like the fact that it was out there. So as a result, that's where all that took place. And after the win over Ramirez in 1985, he thought he would get more lucrative fights, but basically guaranteed pay between him and Don King, which we know what happens when you sign with Don King, started to rear its ugly head. And that's why we had the situation with the Edwin Rosario fight in 86. And that's why everything went south. This was a case of people seeing the light for Hector Camacho. When we think about these 2 wins over Ramirez and Limon, one thing that got him going was being in the ring, being in the spotlight on national television, just showing the whole world just how great he is. As Teddy Atlas perfectly said, there's always was something knocking on that door when it came to Hector Camacho. Always, even in his heyday, it was always something. Someone was always in the way. It was chronicled. Had to do time in Rikers Island for stealing cars. Of course, revealed, the cocaine addiction where his mom passed through knocked that door down and flushed the cocaine down the toilet. And basically, that's where the life and the career of Hector Camacho got topsy-turvy. But in the middle of having that topsy-turvy career in life, were flashes of brilliance with these 2 particular fights. And we think about these 2 particular fights, just something where Hector Camacho falls in that category of what could have been. I mean, everybody talks about all of this and whatever he had outside the ring, rightfully so. Maybe the most pure raw talent in that weight class for that time. It was a premier name before Sugar Ray Leonard, while Leonard was during his retirement, and before this fellow named Mike Tyson came along. I mean, all 3 had same parallels. I mean, the inconsistent careers in and out of the ring, when they were in the ring, showed flashes of greatness and what they could have been. The only difference is Leonard took it to a higher level than the other two. But in the case of Hector Camacho, we think about that fight with Jose Luis Ramirez 40 years ago today. That was a flash of just what could have been had he made the right decisions, stayed on the right path. And basically, when he fired Billy Giles, and of course, a dispute with Don King, he basically couldn't stay straight. It went all topsy-turvy for him. And never mind, this is before the Rosario fight, and we know what happened to Hector Camacho after the Edwin Rosario fight. So everyone gets all over the place when it comes to the career of Hector Camacho. I get it. But when he won these 2 world titles on this day, in '83 in Puerto Rico over Bazooka Limon, and 40 years ago today in Vegas over Jose Luis Ramirez, he had the world in his hands. I mean, everyone fell in love with him. I mean, everyone fell in love with him. They loved the different uniqueness because, let me remind you, this is before exhibitionism and the outfits and all the stuff we see today was prevalent as it is. The guy that really spearheaded this was Hector Camacho during his heyday. I mean, even all of his outfits. I mean, for all the fights of his career, you can pull up all the outfits he had. I mean, the one he had, the Alaskan coat when he went in the ring as John Montes. Of course, he had the sequins robe for the Ramirez fight. Of course, the Indian chief outfit when he fought Vinny Pazienza, among many others. But he brought the uniforms. He brought a different style. He brought a uniqueness. And what made him stand out, he wanted to be the first of his kind. He did not want to be the new Ali. He did not want to be the new Ray Leonard. He just wanted to be the first Hector Camacho. And what he did in these 2 fights, he was on the right path to doing that. And there were flashes of what he could have been had he stayed on the right path. And if he would have stayed on the right path, who knows what we would have been talking about. I mean, just in terms of sheer talent, raw talent, the word talent can be used real loosely. Hector Camacho had it. Everybody can be an it guy in all sports or all walks of life. But for that time, Hector Camacho, when we look at these 2 wins, when he captured the 2 world titles, had the potential to be the it guy, and looked like he was on going to be the bigger and better things. Of course, I think it was revealed one of the shows. He had a studio where he was having his own song called Macho Time. And when the 2 wins over Limon and Ramirez were certainly macho time when you think about the great Hector Camacho. And of course, a lot of the inconsistencies in between. When you have a career of peaks and valleys like this, it's going to catch up to you sooner than you think. Because your biggest, his biggest lookout for Camacho was when he was in the ring, he dazzled, he flashed. When he flashed, you were glued to the television set. You were glued into what he brought to the table. When we talk about the art of the sweet science, before we had guys like Pernell Whitaker and some of these natural fighters in those weight classes, Hector Camacho was exactly like that. There's the speed, which is natural and beautiful to watch. The ability to put combinations together on the southpaw stance, body and head. The way he overwhelmed you with the speed and the angles he was coming from. And the flashing, what they call the trip hammer right jab, which was so quick you couldn't even see it coming. It was a thing of beauty. And that's what set up everything about Hector Camacho. But we know every sad story, every story like this that has its ups, has to come down. And we know what happened to Hector Camacho. As I alluded to a couple months ago on my Edwin Rosario show, that's where we know about the topsy-turviness. Everything really just came down to him on that particular day. And from that point forward, the rest is history. One of the more topsy-turvy careers and topsy-turvy lives that is simple but difficult, easy but sophisticated and confusing, all in the same sentence. But maybe one word to best describe Hector Camacho was adventurous, because he certainly was. He brought his own uniqueness, his own style, his own flash, his own flamboyance, and he certainly was a thing of beauty when he wanted to put his mind to it, and he showed it in the two world title wins on this day, 42 years ago in Puerto Rico when he obliterated Bazooka Limon, and 40 years ago today in Las Vegas when he just paintbrushed and shut out a 91 veteran in Jose Luis Ramirez. Shutting out a 91 fighter isn't easy for anyone. And back in those days, if you pitched a shutout against a guy like Jose Luis Ramirez, you were the real deal. Hector Camacho was about to become the real deal until the wheels came off. And boy, did they came off, and they came off fast, because everything that happened to him especially in between the two title wins over Limon and Ramirez, you had a feeling it was going to catch up to him at some point because everything that was documented in the Showtime documentary, a lot of us witnessed it in his heyday, but no one saw it quite like it was revealed because the style and the flamboyance in the ring of Hector Camacho basically put it all under the rug for those particular nights. And when they put it under the rug, it's like no one even thought about it or even talked about it because the only thing they wanted to talk about was just how great this guy was, and this guy was spectacular. But of course, as this went on, we know a lot of things. When it's a topsy-turvy, the stuff they were cheering Hector Camacho for, they were now booing. And it, like, the old stories, good versus evil, good guy versus the villain. Once he was a good guy, and then now after the Rosario fight, then he started to become the villain. And now everything changed, not just in the ring, but outside of it. And it's a case of where you can't keep the outside in and the inside out. You couldn't separate the two because at some point when they come together like that, it's going to become spontaneous combustion. And that's what happened to Hector Camacho. He couldn't just keep the two separate. He couldn't keep the focus for the longest time. Granted, he had some good wins and good performances after the Ramirez fight. It's been really more topsy-turvy after Edwin Rosario in '86. But the greatness that we saw when he beat Ramirez and Limon wasn't no longer there. Yes, you heard the cliche macho time before the Rosario fight, especially when it really went macho time when he beat Limon, because macho time was the it thing. He was still trying to coin the phrase macho time after the Rosario fight, but you can almost see it in his eyes. It was no longer there. It was certainly no longer there when he hit the bottom in 1992 when he just got beat down and bum rushed by Julio Cesar Chavez, which basically was his end at that point. I mean, he did get the two wins over the 40-somethings, Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran, and the key word being 40-somethings. But somehow he got a title shot by beating them to fight Oscar De La Hoya, and he got bum rushed in that one also. And basically a title shot he had no business getting. But like everyone else after that, carried on as long as he should. But after that fight, after those fights, especially the Chavez loss in 1992, everything came out just out of nowhere, up underneath the rug, all of his problems, because now he was asking Don King for fronting dollars so he can fill a drug fix, which is something he could never escape, no matter how hard he tried. And it basically caught up to him, and we know what happened, unfortunately, in the end of the near Thanksgiving of 2012, when he was tragically taken away from us. A lot of reasons for it. I want to use my platform tonight for it. Maybe another time, another day. But when you talk about what could have been fighters, top 10, he's in that list. Because when you talk about Limon and Ramirez, what he did to those two guys, and they're not guys that just came out of nowhere, just names to throw out. These are two proven vets who were world champions and former world champions. And Camacho and Ramirez Camacho just dusted off Limon and Ramirez effortlessly, not just beat him, effortlessly. I mean, Limon or Ramirez, I couldn't even count a real single punch of significance they landed on Camacho. That should tell you the it factor Hector Camacho is, and the it factor Hector Camacho could have had the rest of the way had he stayed straight. Again, everything started to pile on, but that's what happened to him at the end. What could have been athlete, but we think of August 12th in both Puerto Rico in 1983 and Las Vegas in 1985. The nights belonged to Hector Camacho when he reached the pinnacle 2 separate times in 2 separate weight classes, when he beat both the tough and durable Rafael Bazooka Limon in 1983 in his home country of San Juan, Puerto Rico, and really a packed house in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I mean, you couldn't find an empty seat in that ring. And in 1985, in the middle of all the craziness that went out with him outside of the ring, we talk about the firing of Billy Giles and the dispute with Don King. Put it all together to give a performance of perfection against a 90-win tough guy in Jose Luis Ramirez, which you couldn't keep the two separate, the in of the ring lifestyle and outside of the ring lifestyle. You just couldn't keep it separate. It eventually avalanched on him slowly but gradually. As it was said about him, there was always something that was just knocking on the door with him. There's always something. Whatever got him through was what the skill set he showed us in the ring. That was it. And when it got to the point where he couldn't have that skill set anymore as his career went on, especially after the Rosario fight, and when he bombed him out against Chavez in '92, that's when it all roped. But what a thing of beauty Hector Camacho was on these two particular fights, and he was a thing of beauty. Just the biggest misfortune, he couldn't stay on the straight and narrow. Granted, we can say that for a lot of athletes who were in that what if category. But Hector Camacho, for his time, was certainly a what if athlete had he would stayed on a straight and narrow, especially in the ring. Because his path to greatness, he was on a fast track. And when you win 2 world titles in a 2-year period against the guys he just demolished, you were the it guy. I mean, after the Ramirez fight, he was called out for fights like against guys like Ray Mancini and Pernell Whitaker, just to name a couple of them. But then everything just fell apart. And of course, they threw him in the ring with Edwin Rosario, June 13th, 1986. We know what happened in round 5 of that fight. And once that left hook clonked him, that was all she wrote. At the end of the day, and I say this to everyone in the fight community because everyone's guilty of this, and at times I am too. You don't know what goes on in the fighter's psyche when they get in the ring or how the life they live outside of the ring, and what happens when the in the ring and out of the ring lifestyles can't be separated. We're talking about mine. The great Sean O'Grady eloquently said, boxing is 90% mental, 10% physical. The mind, Hector Camacho's mental problems, he personally documented himself, revealed as time wore on. And when he was able to put the mind together to beat Rafael Bazooka Limon in 1983 and Jose Luis Ramirez in 1985, just showed how the mental aspect of the sport of boxing is and was. And because of it, that's how he was great. But when that night came of June 13th, 1986 against Edwin Rosario, especially in that 5th round when that left hook starched him, the psyche of Hector Camacho was totally different. You don't know what's going to happen when a fighter gets in that ring. You don't know what's going to happen to a fighter when he gets hit. And that's what happened as time went on for Hector Camacho. The mindset, and when it comes to everything else, changed and changed forever. But a case of a fight, again, as I said, it was said many times, a case of a fighter that could have been more than what he was. And I mean, 2 world titles in a 2-year period, a hell of a run, but should have been more than that. Had he listened to everyone around him, because he had many people around him. And after he beat Limon in '83, he basically just sent him out the door, and he no longer stayed on that straight and narrow. Managed to gather himself up for the Ramirez win in '85, but that basically was the end game for him. And as I said, the Ramirez fight was one of those performances of perfection in the sport that everyone loves to see and loves to watch. And it certainly was a beauty how he just paintbrushed and shut out Jose Luis Ramirez, who nobody really shut out. I mean, Pernell Whitaker shut him out, but after Ramirez was on the downturn. But Hector Camacho was just a thing of beauty. And what he did to in 1983 to Bazooka Limon, when he put up that combination and sent him through the ropes, and basically 2 years later, in the middle of everything that happened around him, for him to gather himself to shut out Jose Luis Ramirez, it was a thing of beauty. And those 2 nights will forever be macho time. And I mean, legitimately macho time, because when macho time was macho time, it certainly was. Anybody in the fight game could tell you that, especially whoever lived it. Yes, he went on to other title defenses after the Ramirez fight. The Rosario fight is chronicled. Didn't look all that great against Cornelius Boza Edwards. Did manage to win a world title against Ray Mancini in basically a fight that was just, it makes you wonder what the 2 guys were doing in that ring, because it wasn't necessarily a good fight either way. Did get a good last man out performance against Vinny Pazienza in February of '90. The Wild 2 fight series against Greg Haugen, where is it one of those greatly bizarre fights. If you watch the 2 of them, you can see it for yourself. But that was the epitome of what Hector Camacho eventually became. But busted across the charts out of the ring, cocaine addictions, heroin rings, conflicts with others, among many other things. Just goes to show you, if you can't keep things on a straight and narrow outside of the ring, it'll catch up to you inside of the ring. I mean, Hector Camacho did everything he can to separate the 2, but it finally caught up to him. I mean, he was no different than anyone else. I mean, he talked about his mental struggles when they had the build up for the Julio fight. But that's what he went through. And as I said all along, Nobody knows the psyche of a fighter in that ring when they step through the ropes, lace the gloves on, and in some cases, especially with him, what happens with the mind and what happens when they get hit, what happens to the mind after they get hit. Because that's what happened to Hector Camacho when he finally got hit against Edwin Rosario. Actually, there's a fight before that. I can't remember the name. I think it's Reyes Cruz, I think it was, who floored him. I think it was a fight after the Rosario fight, if I'm correct. But once you get hit like that, you don't know what a fighter thinks. And Hector Camacho mentally started as he started to have the off the ring issues, and it ended with the Rosario fight. From that point on, that was all she wrote. But it was August 12th, 1983 in San Juan, Puerto Rico, when he showed the whole world just how much of a thing of beauty he was, when he just dusted off a tough, durable Bazooka Limon in 5 rounds to win the super featherweight title. Fast forward 2 years, after all the turmoil outside of the ring, when he just demolished, we got rid of Billy Giles and had the conflict with Don King, demolished a 90-win journeyman fighter, a tough belt holder in Jose Luis Ramirez, basically shutting him out to win his world lightweight title, maybe his finest hour, maybe one of the 20 greatest performances of perfection when you think about the perfect performance for a fighter, because what he did to Jose Luis Ramirez certainly was. And nobody did that to Jose Luis Ramirez before then. Says a lot just how great Hector Camacho was. Right now, the gates of heaven, it is, I'll say this legitimately, the gates of heaven will forever be Macho time, because he's over there dancing with that old song from back in the day, Ain't No Stopping Us Now, with a star-studded audience like none other, dancing away with him. Dance away, Hector Camacho. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I will be back tomorrow night. For those of you who missed any of this part of the Camacho show, you can listen to it on the Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify apps. And as always, I tell everyone, make taking care of yourself your number one priority in life. If you do that, good things will come your way. And if you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters in any walk of life. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless, and enjoy the evening.